Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome. Welcome to our session here today. I know that some of you are joining. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes before we get started. But thank you all for connecting, and I hope you're excited to learn a bit about our Umeshu and our sparkling sake set that you've all, I think, kindly purchased from the Japan Center. So yes, my name is Mark, and I'll be your presenter for tonight. I'm streaming live from Japan. It's 10 o'clock here, and I hope it's a lovely afternoon wherever you are. I think we've got Kinu from Japan Center who's helping to organize this event today. And just to let you know that this will be recorded, but it's not for people's faces and things won't be shown. It'll be me and the slides, and then we'll send that out to the people who wanted to join but weren't able to. So just to let everyone know about that. I'm assuming everyone can hear me and see me okay. So if there is anything, please just, if you have any questions as well throughout the session, please just drop them in the chat. And Kino will hopefully try and keep an eye on that. And if we have any good questions or well-timed questions, I'll try and answer them then and there. If not, I'll maybe save them to the end, okay? Well, I think if anyone's later than this, then they don't deserve to get the beginning. So let's just start, shall we? So again, thank you all for joining us today. My name is Mark. I work at Gekkeikan Sake Company here in Kyoto as an export area manager. That's my main job, but I also do sessions like this with the Japan Center, with places to talk about sake. Today, we're going to talk about umeshu and sparkling sake. And it's going to be very, very easy today, very casual, very simple, nothing too heavy. Don't worry about it. I'm going to talk about who and what is Gekkeikan, what is Utakata? What is Utakata? That's our sparkling sake. What is Umeshu? And how do we best enjoy these drinks? And we've got two very, very, very simple cocktail ideas at the very end. Okay, so without further ado, I'm just going to launch in. Again, if anyone has any issues, throw it in the chat, and then we'll try and deal with that as best we can. Okay, so Gekkeikan is a sake company. Okay, and sake brewing goes back maybe about 1,000 years. It's 1,000 years ago. It wasn't really similar to what we have today. But Gekkeikan's story goes back about 385 years to 1637. This is an old picture of an old sake brewery that was discovered in Kyoto, by the way. And Kyoto, if anyone's been there, is where we are based. More specifically, this is a map of Japan. We're going to zoom into where we are here. So Kyoto is in the center of Japan. There it is near Osaka. Fushimi is where we're based. It's just south of Kyoto. And there is Gekkeikan circled there. We're in this Fushimi area, and it's a very, very famous sake brewing region of Japan. It's the #2 sake brewing region of Japan. There's about 25 sake breweries, all kind of crammed into this little, relatively small area. It's quite a small area. It's nothing, huge. And it's a very famous place for making sake. And it's actually a pretty historical, pretty famous place as well. So it's located just south of Kyoto. So if anyone's been to Kyoto, or if anyone's planning a future trip to Kyoto, for example, you'll probably recognize this picture of the shrine gates of Fushimi Inari Taisha. That's the same Fushimi, it's just up the road. And it's a very historical place. And why is this Fushimi area so famous for sake brewing is the big question. And it's all down to the water. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, don't worry. But the water of this Fushimi area has always been very well regarded for its sake making abilities, or for its mineral content. And this is a modern day Google Maps view of the Fushimi area. But this whole area here actually used to be all water. There used to be all this water springs up around this Fushimi area. And so basically it gathers, it flows down the mountains around Kyoto and gathers in an underground reservoir right underneath Kyoto city and this Fushimi area, and it wells up in places all around here. So this used to be all water. It was drained in, I think, the mid-20th century. So if we look at this old map of the area, I think this is something from the 18th century, maybe 19th century. If we flip it, so this is facing north, we can actually overlay a modern Google Maps of the area on top of this old map, and you can see it roughly lines up. Actually, it's very much unchanged. This image you see in the top right, this was actually a castle that was built in the area, and the canals, that was all, it formed part of this moat system for the castle. That is now gone. So we've left with these little these canals and rivers all around this area, and so it's very famous nowadays as, or it was in the 19th and 20th century, as an inland port. It's one of Japan's very few or only inland ports, and so lots of goods would go down the river towards Osaka and to the rest of the country, and so it was a very strategic place. But also because it was, it's kind of like a crossroads between Kyoto and Nara. It's right between Kyoto and Nara, north and south. It's also between Osaka and Tokyo. So Osaka to the west, Tokyo to the east. It's all, it's between all these four major cities in Japan. And so it prospered as a crossroads town, basically. And guess what? Lots of travelers they need lots of sake as well. So this was a very, very famous place for making sake for a few hundred years. And Gekkeikan is, I think, the oldest sake brewery in this area. It's founded in 1637 by a chap named Okura Jiemon. Now, Okura is the family name, and Jiemon is the first name. And he founded it as called Kasagiya, after his hometown, which is near Nara, called Kasagi. And we only started being called Gekkeikan in about the early 20th century, after the 11th generation head, this handsome man on the top right with the mustache, Okura Tsunekichi. He completely revolutionized the business and indeed the sake industry back in that time, and it's still operated today by the Okura family. So this man in the bottom right, that's the 14th generation head of the family. He's the president of the company, and it's still, I think there are 3 or 4 other family members still involved day to day in the running of the business. So it's still a very much family run, operated, family owned sake brewery, and it's one of the largest sake producers in the world. And if you do have the chance, Japan is still not open to tourists, but we're hoping that it will be very soon open to visitors. You can come visit us here in Fushimi. We've got a museum that has very recently been renovated. Now, renovated being that we've kept the old structure of this, I think 1907, I want to say. It was built in 1907. The building is the original with some, obviously some extra supports and things, but it's been renovated. The museum is quite new. We've added a whole new bunch of things, including lots of different sakes to taste. So if you do find your way over to Japan, please, please, please come visit us, because there's lots to learn about and certainly lots of sake to taste, not just at Gekkeikan, but also in the area as well. So that is my very, very brief introduction to Gekkeikan, because today we're not really talking about sake, actually. We have a sparkling sake, but it's technically not a sake, and I want to talk about that. So, what is sake, and what is our sparkling sake, Utakata? That's what I want to say to everyone to explain today. So first things first, sake is a fermented alcoholic beverage. I hope that the people joining us today were probably aware of that, but it's not distilled. And this is why some people call it a rice wine. Okay, so it's about the same kind of alcoholic strength as wine. It's made from water, it's made from milled or polished rice, and it's made from this magic ingredient, rice koji. Now, koji is kind of like a fungus that we use to make sake. And to explain, I'm not going to go into too much detail today, but to make alcohol in general, you need two things generally. You need yeast. Yeast is a microorganism, just like you have in bread, for example. And you need sugar, you need glucose. You need to feed the yeast sugar. Now, the yeast consumes this glucose, this sugar, and it turns it into ethanol, alcohol, and it turns it into carbon dioxide. Now, this is the important part about what I want to talk about today, about sparkling sake. So this process known as fermentation, this is what gives us all the good stuff with regards to alcohol and indeed sparkling sake. So with wine, I said sake is not a wine. So with wine, it's a very, very simple, straightforward fermentation. So you have grapes, you smush them up and you get grape juice, and there's lots of sugar in grape juice. You leave it out, you have some yeast fall into it, you set it aside for some time, wait a while, boom, you have wine. That's the very basic gist of it. And the same is true for sake, but you also need to convert the starch in the rice grains into sugar. And that's where our friend Koji comes in here in the bottom right, okay? So when we make sparkling wine and sparkling sake, how do we do that? Now, there are two main ways you can make sparkling sake and sparkling wine. There's what's known as secondary fermentation. Now, this is what is, this is your champagne. This is all your famous sparkling wines. These are the ones that are made in the traditional way. So what happens is you make your wine as normal, and when you bottle it, you've still got yeast in the wine, in the liquid itself, that's still working, that's still doing its thing. It's still converting sugar into alcohol, but also carbon dioxide. Now, if you can cork that bottle tight enough, if you can get a good enough seal, then there's nowhere for that carbon dioxide that's being released from that fermentation process. There's nowhere for that to go. And so the pressure builds inside the bottle to the point where the gas is absorbed back into the wine. And so that's when you pour it, that's how you have that naturally fizziness, right? And you can make sake in this way as well. The thing with making sake in this method is that it's very, very difficult to control. So remember, we don't have just yeast, we have another microorganism working for us when we make sake, and that's our friend Koji here, our friend rice koji. So this, as I said, this is a fungus that's sprinkled on cooked rice, and what it does, in very simple terms, it converts the starch into sugar for us. So without it, we can't make sake from rice, okay? So it's absolutely critical, essential to the sake making process. But this also means that we have two microorganisms in our liquid. And so if we bottle the sake, then we've got both yeast and we've got koji living in our bottle. And they're both still going to be working inside the bottle when we want to have it creating bubbles, when we want to have it creating gas. And so it's very difficult to control how much they work, how much they consume of sugar and consume, and turn that into gas. And so it's a very difficult process to control just how much fizziness you get, with sake and how much that's going to change the final flavor while it's still in the bottle. And so there are sakes that are made in this traditional method using secondary fermentation, but a lot of sparkling sake is made using injection. Now, Utakata, our sparkling sake today, is made with injection. Now, this injection is essentially, if you imagine a soda stream, a giant soda stream, you're basically just pumping CO2, you're pumping carbon dioxide into your sake. And yes, it might not sound like the most glamorous or traditional way of doing it, but there are many advantages to doing this, namely that we can have much, much greater control of how much gas goes into the liquid, the fizziness of it, and it's just much more reliable, and it does help to keep the product uniform. It guarantees quality every single time. And so for us, we thought it was a better decision to make our Utakata with this injection method. And so we hope that its very gentle bubbliness will be pleasing to everyone. So that was, just want to explain the two ways of making sparkling wine and sparkling sake. Okay, so then what is our Utakata? What even is Utakata? What does this mean? So for those of you familiar with Japanese kanji characters, this is how you write it. And this essentially just means bubbles, bubbles, bubbly bubbles. It's kind of like a poetic way of expressing air or bubbles, or I guess effervescence is the technical term. The fizziness that you get in a drink or something. So that's why it's called Utakata. And I mentioned that it's not technically a sake. It's technically a sake liqueur, because in Japan, sake has to be over 10% alcohol, so 10% ABV or above. And this one is only 5. So for those of you who are already sipping on it, please, if you haven't started already, go ahead. More than welcome to sip along. It's a 5% tipple, very, very easy to drink. It's lovely and light and sweet and fruity. And it just goes down quite a treat. And you might notice also on the bottle, it says so just under the name Utakata. And that's the name of a textile company, actually, that's based here in Kyoto. And this so company, they make textiles, they make pattern textiles, clothes, and in the traditional way, using traditional methods, but with these very bright, colorful, modern designs. And we teamed up with them to make this wonderful bottle, and they designed the floral pattern that you see on there. So that's what the so on the front of the bottle means. Now, how do we want to drink this? I think this is perfect as like an aperitif just before, a meal, or especially with desserts, because you have that nice light sweetness, and you pair that with some sweeter meals or sweeter dishes, and just serve it as is. Now you can have that in a champagne flute or a sherry glass, those kind of triangular ones like that, or like a tulip shaped one. Now, I think that is a really, I think that's the nicest way of having it, but you can have it over ice as well. Or if you can hold out until then, we've got a cocktail idea later for you. So I know it's very easy to drink, so just be careful. Be careful it doesn't go down too smoothly, and it's only 20 past 2 in the afternoon. So just if you want to know about the cocktail idea, well, I guess you've got a second bottle as well. So watch the space. We'll talk about that later. Okay, so that's our very brief introduction into Utakata. Very light, easy to drink sake liqueur, not technically a sake. It is made with sake, of course, and then it's adjusted to be this 5% lovely tipple that we have here. And what is our second product that we have in our set today? we've got Umeshu. Okay, now the official name of this, I've got a bottle here with me actually. This is a slightly larger 720 milliliter version. I think everyone's got the 450 milliliter. You can get the bigger one from Japan Center if you really like it. So I hope you enjoyed it. But the official name of this product is Gekkeikan Umeshu Genshu. Now it might be a mouthful for some of you. It's a mouthful for me, even and I know Japanese, but it's a long name, and it's of this umeshu, and I'm going to explain how it breaks down and what that means. But umeshu has been produced and it's been enjoyed in Japan for centuries. I've read somewhere that maybe even 1,000 years, but who knows. And it enjoys a certain special status in Japan, actually. It's not just in the sense that it's loved across the country, but actually legally there's a special exception made for umeshu. Now, what is umeshu? It's often, I think on the Japan Center website, it's called Gekkeikan Umeshu plum wine. Here we go again with the wine. And guess what? You know where I'm going with this? This is not a wine at all. Okay, so no offense, Japan Center, technically not a wine. Maybe you should be listening. Kidding. But let me tell you why it's not a wine and what it actually is and how you make it. Because guess what? This is actually something you can make at home. So going back to what makes a wine, you have your yeast and you have your sugar. And when you put them together and leave them, they ferment. The yeast ferments into ethanol and carbon dioxide. Now, this fermentation process, this is the key to what's going to determine why it's not a wine. Because why is umeshu not a wine? It's not a fermented drink at all. There's no fermentation that goes on to make this drink. Okay, so how is it made? Well, let's have a look at the name again. Okay, so it's this long thing, Gekkeikan Umeshu Genshu. Now, if we kind of directly translate that, it basically translates to Gekkeikan, the name of the company, fully ripe plum alcohol, original alcohol. What does that mean? Okay, so let's break this down into basically two parts. So I want to take this fully ripe plum and explain what exactly this plum is. Now, before you start thinking that it's the big red kind of purple round juicy plums that we have, or that at least I was used to in the UK before coming to Japan, it's not that at all. And it's this fruit called an ume. Now, these are sometimes called Chinese plums. They're sometimes called Japanese plums. They're sometimes called Japanese apricots. But I'm just going to call them ume or ume plums today. And this picture here that you can see, that's them not quite ripe, still on the tree. And they're grown everywhere in Japan. They've been around for centuries, not just in Japan, all over Asia, Southeast Asia as well. Very famous for their blossoms as well. So everyone right now, the sakura cherry blossoms, they're in full bloom, or maybe we're just past full bloom here in Kyoto. But the ume plum blossoms are a beautiful blossom that comes around about the beginning of February. That's when they start. They have all beautiful shades of whites and pinks and purples. And they're kind of the not so famous blossom that heralds the coming of spring in Japan. Anyway, they're just as beautiful, but they yield this fruit here, this small, they're about this size or so, green fruit at first when they're not fully ripe. And they're used in cooking. They're used to make these kind of dried pickled things called umeboshi. Very, very famous food in Japan, and one of if not the only food in Japan that I don't really like. I must be honest, I don't really like umeboshi. They're very, very sour and tart, I think. I'm still holding out hope to find the one umeboshi that I do like. And of course, they're also used to make umeshu. Now, again, I said they're grown all over Japan, but specifically, about 60 to 70% of all ume are grown in this area of Japan called Wakayama. So this is a prefecture just south of Osaka, just west of Nara. So it's quite near to Kyoto. And Wakayama is very famous for its citrus fruits. I think it grows, 10% of all the oranges in Japan as well. It grows yuzu citrus. It grows a lot of orchard fruits as well. So it's very mountainous. It gets a lot of rain, but also a lot of sun as well. And it's famous for Mount Koya, a very famous temple complex. It might be on some of your Japan tourist lists if you've made an itinerary. Anyway, it grows about 60 to 70% of all the ume in Japan. And as I said, these are used in cooking and to make umeboshi, but they're also used in umeshu. And for this umeshu that we have here, we use ume grown in Wakayama. But specifically, we have a type called nanko ume. And now these are specifically prized for their rich sweetness. They're very, very mellow, and they've got these beautiful, deep sweet flavor, sometimes like plums, not plums, peaches, excuse me. And generally speaking, these nanko ume, they're the green, unripe ume are used in umeshu. And the ones that are left to fully ripen, these are made to make into umeboshi. And so you get kind of the harvesting season is a bit different. Usually the ume plums are harvested around June or July maybe, and that's when you start making umeshu. Now, you might have had umeshu before. I think the biggest brand, I think all over the world for umeshu is Choya, very, very famous brand, CHOYA. And they make a few different types of umeshu. But a lot of umeshu can be quite tart and quite sour as well. And this is because they use kind of the unripened ume as well. That's the traditional way. For our Gekkeikan umeshu, we actually use fully ripened ume to make the umeshu. Okay, so it's that's why we specify that it's these fully ripe plums, and that it yields this wonderful deep sweetness to this umeshu that I think you should have already tasted by now. It's very, very tasty. And so that's why we mentioned that in the name, because it is something that is generally, or it's unusual, I guess, when we make umeshu. So what is the second half of this? We've got the plum alcohol, original alcohol. What does that even mean? Okay. And I think to explain what that means is we have to explain what umeshu is and how it's made. And remember, I said it's not a fermented drink. And that's because umeshu is made in a pretty straightforward, quite simple method. And so first of all, we take our ume fruit, we take a whole bucket of them, and we take off all the stalks, take off anything of that, put them in a bucket, and you add essentially just distilled alcohol. Most commonly in Japan, it's something called white liquor, which is essentially just watered down ethanol. So it's kind of flavorless, colorless. There's no aromas to it. It's basically just straight ethanol that's watered down a bit. But you can use any high alcohol spirit. Now there are two reasons for this, and I said umeshu enjoys kind of a special status in Japan legally, and one of the reasons that we use a spirit to make umeshu is that it's actually illegal to brew your own alcohol in Japan. So I know there are certain places where you can home brew. You know, home brewing is very big in the United States, for example, where people make their own beers or their wines or something. In Japan, it is illegal to make any fermented alcohol or any alcohol without a license. And alcohol counts as anything that is over 1% ABV. So if you have something that is 1.1% alcohol, then you are making alcohol and you need a license for that. And you need to be able to make, you know, however many thousand liters of alcohol a year to be able to get that license. So if you were to try and make umeshu by getting a whole bucket of plums and adding, for example, wine, regular wine, about 12%, for example, there is a chance that you're going to have fermentation happen in your bucket of plums and wine. And so it's actually illegal to make umeshu in Japan with something that's less than 20% alcohol. Now, I say it's illegal to make it in Japan because this is something that Japanese people do pretty much every year. It's a very common thing, has been for many years. So you can go into a supermarket in, you know, June or July, and you can buy a whole bucket of plums, and they'll sell like a bottle of this white liquor to go with it, and you can make your own umeshu at home. Why? Because it's not fermenting anything. We're using alcohol to extract flavor from these ume plums. So by steeping these plums in alcohol, you extract flavor. And that's why we use a high alcohol spirit as well, because the higher that the ABV, the more of that flavor can be, I guess, dissolved in the liquid, the more you can extract it. The other things you need to do, you add sugar or a sugar source. Again, so this can be, it can be white sugar, it can be brown sugar, it could be honey. But basically you want to add some extra sweetness to it, because sometimes, as I said, we use the green kind of unripe plums a lot when making umeshu. For this one, we use the fully ripe plums, which are quite sweet as well. But generally, you want to add a little bit of sugar to help just adjust that lovely flavor profile. You get all those things, you mix them up really good, and you leave it to rest. Again, you just kind of put it to one side. Now, some people say it has to be 6 months. Some people say 9 months. I think a lot of people make it 1 year and then drink it the next year. So it seems to be very much like a summer drink in Japan. I feel like you have umeshu over ice or with sparkling water or something. It's kind of a summery, pimsy kind of drink. And then this is an optional stage. You remove the excess alcohol. Now, optional because depending on what you use to make your umeshu, the alcohol strength will vary. So if you use something that's, you know, you can make it with 100% ethanol, but you're not going to drink it at that level. So you want to bring that down to something that's palatable, either by burning off alcohol or by adding water. So steps 1 to 6, it's actually a very, very easy to make drink, but it's difficult to master. You know, I think there are lots of details that you can adjust to get the fine flavor. And for example, for this Gekkeikan Umeshu, we have lots of different individual batches of these kind of plums, of steeping the plums in this alcohol. And then that's blended to make sure that it's the absolute best flavor profile each and every time. And the alcohol is roughly around 12 or 35% usually for umeshu that you buy generally. I think, again, looking at Choya, the most famous brand, they have a lot of them around 15%, but it can vary greatly. Okay, and Gekkeikan Umeshu is actually kind of in a weird spot. It's at 19%. And I think it's uncommon, but it makes it very versatile, I think. And this is where we get to this original alcohol that I mentioned. What does that mean? It's actually made with no other additives, no flavorings, no colorings. This wonderful caramel color, that is just from the fruit itself, no preservatives. So if you look in your bottle, you might see like bits kind of floating in it. That's just from the fruit. That's all just being dissolved into the liquid. There are some umeshus that are made with kind of like flavoring extracts to kind of recreate the ume flavor, but not this one. This is the real deal in that sense. It's known as honkaku, if you're looking for the key terminology. Now, how do we enjoy this? I really like this as a dessert. Just as you would kind of like a dessert wine or like a port or something. It's really thick and sweet. It's almost syrupy when you pour it, right? So honestly, for me, it's a bit much on its own. To just drink that straight, it's a little too much. It's a little too rich. It's a little too sweet. So I like it on the rocks, just in a tumbler with sparkling water. You can add that to make it very refreshing. Or what I've been drinking today is with whiskey. So I've got a cup here, a glass here, just a kind of whiskey tumbler. And if anyone's interested, I've got a slightly sweet whiskey. It's a Speyside. And so it's kind of like a sweeter dessert whiskey. And I just go, pretty much eyeball it, half and half. This I found has been very nice. And I've had it with cola before. So if you can imagine like a Jack Daniel and Coke kind of, you've got your sweet bourbon and your sweet Coke. It's the same kind of feeling where you've got you're mixing sweet and sweet, and so it actually worked very well with cola. And I found this has worked very well. So if you would like to try that, cheers, because my throat's getting a bit dry. Wonderful. There's the woodiness of that whiskey goes very well with the sweetness of the umeshu, I thought. So I've been drinking that tonight, and as a suggestion. But we do have a couple of very, very simple cocktail ideas for you today. Now, the first one is for our Utakata sparkling sake. Now, there's one challenge that you have with making sake cocktails, and that is the fact that sake is quite a subtle drink. It's not hugely punchy, doesn't have really bold flavors, generally speaking. They're quite fruity, they're quite light, they're quite gentle. And so I think if you start mixing sake in with, I don't know, like fruit juices or like rum or something, you're going to really lose the sake flavor is just going to disappear, I think. And so that's why I think sake pairs or in a cocktail would go much better with something more simple, like gin, where you've got just kind of the accents of the gin spirit, and they're mixing with the deeper kind of flavor of the sake. And so this is from the Japan Center website. They've got a whole bunch of these recipes and cocktail recipes as well. So please have a look there. I've posted the link at the bottom of the slide there. You can type that in, or I think if there's a tab on the website that you can look at their recipes. But this is one called Yuzu Splash. Yuzu because it suggests using this yuzu gin by a company called Kyoya Shuzo. So yuzu it's kind of like a lemon. It's called a Japanese citrus sometimes. It's kind of like a slightly bitter lemon, but I think this kind of more simple, more light spirit goes very well with sake, and especially this Utakata, where it's quite light at 5%, and the flavors are sweet, and you know, if you paired it with something else, it's going to completely disappear. And really, really easy. Just pour a little bit of gin into your glass, top it off with Utakata, give it a good mix, and then garnish it with whatever you have handy. I think it doesn't need to be this yuzu gin. I think if you have any kind of botanical kind of gin that's going to go well, you know, the whole point of this is to have fun exploring what you know, new horizons and new experiences for yourself as well. So play around with whatever you've got at home, but bear in mind that I think a gin will go very well with this Utakata. And it's, yeah, going to be a very nice, refreshing, I think, summer drink if the weather is good. I hear the weather is good over there. And for the umeshu, we've got a very good, I really like this idea. I haven't actually made it myself yet, but I said that umeshu and sparkling water is a really nice, refreshing way of enjoying this, because on its own, it's a bit heavy for me. And this is taking that one step further and making a mojito out of this umeshu. Now, what I quite like about this umeshu is that it's got a kind of it does have this brown sugary kind of flavor, this rich tartness, almost like almonds or marzipan, I think. And so you want to make use of that sugar and that richness. And maybe it's most similar to something like rum, perhaps. And so you're essentially just switching out the rum for this umeshu and this faux mojito. But you can, again, mix the umeshu with some sparkling water, lime, mint, and some sugar. Mix that all up and basically make a kind of simple mojito. And that's really going to be a nice, refreshing take on that, especially if you find it a bit heavy on its own, like I do. And so these are just some ideas. I think there are some other cocktail ideas on the website as well. There's a whole host of ideas on the internet. If you just kind of have a search for, you know, umeshu cocktails, there's going to be a whole number of them that you can have fun with, I think, if you're that way inclined. If you're more like me, you can just enjoy it as is. As I said, I really like this with desserts. I think it pairs really well with chocolate in general. So if you have like a chocolate fudge cake, or do we still have Viennettas? That kind of thing. I've literally poured this over vanilla ice cream before as almost like as an ice cream syrup to give the ice cream a little punch of flavor, and it's really, really tasty that way. So you can even use it in applications like that as well, not just cocktails, not just drinking as itself. And we're just getting to the very end of this. I said about 45 minutes was going to be what we had planned today. And so I just want to end with an announcement, mixed emotions here, that it's kind of the end of an era for Utakata. This Utakata that you have here, it's actually going to get updated. And so the Utakata that we sent to Japan Center, that is one of the very last batches that we made. So once it's gone, it's gone. So sad, but it's going to be replaced with something new, hopefully something better. So if you really like today's Utakata, please go back to the Japan Center and pick up another bottle or so, because once it's gone, that's it. It's not going to come back. But I do hope that we'll have our new sparkling sake that will be on sale, hopefully sometime this year, depending on the shipping situation and things. But hopefully that will be on sale at the Japan Center soon. Maybe I'll even have another chance to introduce that to everyone. But just to let you know that this is the last batch. So if you want to have it, pick it up now before it's too late. Okay. And that is the end of this very, very short, very simple, very straightforward introduction to these two products. I hope this has given you a bit of insight and a bit of appreciation to enjoy these products a bit more. And again, play around with them. They're wonderful little products, especially the Umeshu. It's very versatile. If you have, I think, a sore throat, you could even have it warmed up. Whereas the Utakata, I think, it's a little more limited, but it's still refreshing and on its own, or in a cocktail with something light or less powerful, for example, gin. So I really hope that this little session has been helpful, and you've learned a little bit about Gekkeikan, about Umeshu, and about sparkling sake today. So thank you all very much for listening. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And I think that's about it. What do you think, Kinu? Is that everything? Did I leave anything out? Do I need to mention anything else?
So if anybody has any questions to Mark, please, if you like to unmute your microphones, please do talk.
Absolutely, yeah. You can either say it or type it if you're feeling shy. Don't worry. If not, then feel free to leave, because I think this is. Otherwise, you're just going to be watching me sip on my whiskey and Umeshu for the rest of the day. Well, if you do have any other questions, I'm sure, does Japan Center have like an inquiries email address they can send to, Kinu?
Yes. So we'll be sending that out right now.
Yes, and so if you do have anything, you can get in touch and we'll try and answer your questions, or and we'll send, I think, a follow-up email with the link to this. Is that right, Kinu?
Yes, for the recording as well.